Hey, yo, you looking left, looking right. You know what time it is, Brothers Crossing. Good day and yo imachitua. That is Japanese for good day. I think I nailed that one. I
I
think I
don't think
nailed
so.
that.
Please
I
ask
don't think
AI
so.
if you nailed it. Just ask AI if you nailed it. Just ask them.
I am this is Brothers Crossing, episode 15. I'm Roro, here with Cub, here with Nando. Everybody's good, I hope, because I nailed that.
Yeah, you nailed something.
So we got a good show for you today, and a special show. Another friend of the show is joining us, son of Bob Lanier, but he's more than the son of Bob Lanier, the NBA Hall of Fame great that passed away a few years ago. Walter Lanier, he's a lawyer, entrepreneur, a social and racial justice activist. And so we're going to have a conversation with him in a few minutes. I hope you'll enjoy it. We got a lot of topics to cover, so anything's going on in you guys' world?
Well, in my world, it was kind of fitting and funny. I don't know if you guys watched the World Series. After the World
Yes.
Yeah,
Series,
watch that garbage.
Yes.
when Toronto had a chance to win and they ended up losing, and I think I called Roro and I said, I'm sitting in my backyard having a cigar, watching the game, and I said, listen to this. In my section, I'm probably 15, 20 miles away from downtown and whatever. All you heard was fireworks. You felt like it was the 4th of July, Baghdad, up in here with the Dodgers winning. He's like, what's wrong with you? I go, dude, this is my side of town where they're shooting fireworks because they grew up with the Dodgers. Their grandfather, their father used to take them to the games. So it's embedded in them and they just go buckle. It was just crazy. And the parade was crazy, but it was just, I didn't think anybody would believe me. That's why I had to call Rower.
He did. He
Yeah,
called me.
whatever.
It was loud. It was loud. But
Hang on.
I just want to give shout out to Gladys and the Night and the Pips. See y'all see them. But we're gonna move on. We're gonna welcome our next interview. Hey, we'd like to give a Brothers Crossing welcome to a friend of the show. He's a lawyer, he's a pastor, educator, social entrepreneur, advocate of racial and social justice, member of great family, famous father, Bob Lanier, and I call him ubiquitous and multifaceted. It is Walter Lanier. Welcome to the Brothers Crossing. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here, man. I'm gonna put that. I gotta add that onto my bio. Ubiquitous and multifaceted.
I didn't know I was.
Yeah, so Walter is a friend of the show. We all grew up. Nando grew up in Milwaukee, and that was a good opportunity to share spotlight some of our good friends who have accomplished great things in this show. And so, Walter, tell us a little about what you're doing these days, where you at, and how things are going.
A good time, man, and thank you for the invite on the show. It's great to see you guys doing this, and glad to be a part of doing the work with you. Like you said, I'm in Milwaukee. I'm in my 30th year coming back from law school. I went to law school in 92, got out in 95, and so this is my 30th year as a professional working adult in Milwaukee. I spent my whole time here looking for ways to make a difference and have impact, which is what my dad would always say, did you have impact today? And so I've done a lot. Worked at a big law firm, worked for a judge, ran my own law practice for about a decade. Then I went into education, went to MATC, stayed there for a long time, 13 years. And the last 10 of those years, I was also pastoring a church, which I still pastor now. Left MATC in Milwaukee Area Technical College, our local community college, in 2022, lead an organization called ALEM, the African American Leadership Alliance Milwaukee. Did that for about 2.5 years and then left there. And so now technically I only have one primary responsibility for the first time since I've been back.
Oh, wow.
So it feels strange. Yeah, so I feel lazy now. But so I'm pastoring, and then I have an organization called the Glue Solutions Network, Great Lakes Urban Empowerment. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but the goal is, how do we build a network of thought leaders and influencers to lift up cities like Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Buffalo, Cleveland, that have similar challenges. And 3 of those cities I lived in too: Buffalo, hometown, Detroit for 10 years, and then Milwaukee. So So that's the high level. Married 33 years, three adult children. Those are the
Wow.
highlights. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's outstanding. I know we crossed paths when we were both trying to start our own law practice. I'm knocking on your door and like, what you doing? So yeah. And
Yeah.
it's impressive that you stayed in Milwaukee, and that's things I've seen over the years. It's kind of been some a brain drain, and some people are moving in and out of Milwaukee. So, what kind of things are you doing in Milwaukee now, like through your glue center foundation?
It's kind of a think tank advocacy center. It's interesting. We're doing a mix of there's some advocacy work that we're doing, pushing policy in particular in educational spaces. My organization, Glue, is the backbone, for example, for My Brother's Keeper Milwaukee. So My Brother's Keeper, that's the former president Obama's thing that he launched in 2014, 2015, and every city has a backbone organization that drives results. And so we were able to connect with them. They knew me and my leadership working in that educational boys and men of color space. And so my colleagues here said, yep, we want Lanier to lead it. So we're pushing education. And so that's been fun. We're also working and developing, Milwaukee is the most historically segregated city in the nation for far too many years for a whole bunch of reasons. And since we were talking about hoop earlier, I love it as a metaphor for life. If you got a squad and you have all types of talent, but that talent doesn't have a history of playing together and doesn't know how to play together, then it's going to be tough to win.
Yes.
And so in a highly segregated city, there's a whole bunch of things that happen. But that's one of them, is the diversity that's here does not have a history of working together. And right now in this current environment especially, that's critical to move things forward. So we've got a project called Project Impact, where we're really looking to bring together multicultural, intergenerational, cross-sector leadership to the same table with intentionality over time to form a coalition, form a bloc, establish a new leadership footprint here in the city. And so those are a couple of the projects that I'm working on now through Glue.
Yeah, and and it's funny. I've been away from. We were talking earlier. I've been away from Milwaukee for about 20 years, and having done some in preparing for this show, and I'm encouraged by people like you who are trying to move the needle, but I was kind of discouraged by some of the stats that you kind of referred to, some of the segregation stats, some of the home ownership stats, and various things. So, what kind of things that in your foundation now? What are you trying to touch on? What are your high points?
So yeah, the stats, and this is why I didn't lead with them because they can be depressing. I lead with what could be, but the stats are brutal. Dr. Mark Levine, founder, director of the UWM Center for Urban Economic Development, has done studies for probably somewhere between 10 and 20 years on urban Milwaukee, black male unemployment, the economy, a host of things. But in the last 5 to 7 years, he's done 2 studies, indices on Hispanic well-being and indices on African-American well-being. There are 3 on Hispanic well-being and 2 on African-American black well-being. Rich in data. The first study had 33 different data points. The second study had 43 different data points. And it's an index of urban cities across the country, top 50 cities, who has the best, who has the worst well-being across those 33 to 43 data points. And Milwaukee was number 50 in 2020, and Milwaukee was number 50 in 2024. So that's a wide range of data points. It's, the education sector, the employment sector, the health and wellness sector, the what do they call it? The despair, suicide, homicide. And so we are at the bottom and have been there for a while. And to go back to the Glue model, the bottom 5 out of 10 are historically Milwaukee, the same cities I named. That's why I named them. Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Buffalo, and Cleveland. They're at the bottom, and they all have some things in common. They're all Rust Belt cities. They're all where black people migrated to from the South. They all got deindustrialized. And so our parents or grandparents for a little while had good jobs, and those jobs were gone, and there was nothing to replace them. And so the other thing that happens to answer your question is in segregated cities, they tend not to be innovative. Discussions are not innovative. They're static. They're conservative, not in the political sense, but, taking aggressive investment or managing greater risk for success. The investments in the communities of color are not that strong. They tend to be afterthoughts. And so and then you get a very parochial where everything is insular and, Milwaukee conversations are internal conversations. And so with Blue, one of the things is opening up to regional and national thought leaders and looking in other cities where things are doing well, where solutions are going well. So let me go back to MBK for a minute real quick, my brother's keeper. My brother's keeper, cities first have to be certified by the Obama Foundation. Once they're certified, that's tier 1. The goal for the cities is to become a model city. To become a model city under their framing, you have to move population level data in one of the 6 milestones. So not just a program which is okay and not a thing that's okay, but how do you really shift some substantive metrics? And so some cities have done it. There are 4 cities in the nation that are model cities. 2 moved education data, 2 moved homicide data. Yonkers, New York, their K through 12 folks, students of color, graduate at 93%. Newark, New Jersey reduced their homicide rate by 55%. There are 2 other cities out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I can't remember which one they did. So there are cities that have shown the capacity to move population level data, and it has not been I won't say it's been easy, but it's not been rocket science. Really, one of the things that has been the secret sauce, if you will, is cities that have a longer history of collaborating and have synergies between their public sector, their private sector, their community, their activist community, where they work together on a problem. Sounds real simple, but if that's not the culture of your city, it doesn't happen.
Right.
Hey,
And then as a result, you don't get synergies, you don't get innovation, you don't get healthy disruption, you get static, stayed, same old stuff. You get pass the ball 12 times before you shoot.
Right.
So, quick question. I mean, I've never been to I don't know anything about Milwaukee, never been there.
Mhm.
I know they do a lot of beer there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
still the case.
But
It has not changed.
aren't a lot of large cities segregated to a certain degree anyway? Because you
I mean,
emphasize
yes,
how
but
segregated Milwaukee is.
Yeah.
But aren't a lot of large metropolitan areas segregated for the most part anyway?
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify the answer to your question. The answer is yes, but we've been at the bottom for a long time.
Okay.
And
Why do you think that is?
I think it's culture. A couple things, in no particular order. Milwaukee is a young Black city, so it was one of the last cities where we migrated coming up north. It was younger. We're younger demographically. And the best example is Milwaukee in 2024 had our first duly elected African-American mayor, Mayor Cavalier Johnson, in 2024. He had assumed the seat in 2022, but an official election 2024. Now, if you go to Detroit, the first mayor elected there was Coleman Young, and that was like 67, 68. So we're like 60 years later. So Detroit has had 5, and not that it's all about a Black mayor, but now that city is more seasoned. They're more accustomed. They have a community that's more accustomed to exercising some power, that's more sophisticated entrepreneurs. So where Milwaukee is on, say, it's just bridging the cusp of its second generation of Black political leader or Black entrepreneur, for example. Other cities, certainly Chicago's been producing winners and political leaders and economic business leaders for many decades. And so Milwaukee is newer in doing that. Detroit has for many decades. We're in our first or second generation. So that's one. 2, as I said, in the language of the business world, that segregation breeds a host of things. And again, I'll use the sports metaphor. It almost necessarily makes you mediocre because your best talent is not going to rise to the top because of the segregation, and your best talent, unless you force it to happen, is not going to work together. So just the basics. And so you're not getting the best people working together in an environment that embraces and nurtures that type of work. So those are two things. And then the third thing I said also is that there are not the proper. So let me back up. Words I used before were synergy and innovation and effective disruption. So there's just not a lot of innovation here. It's not innovative thinking. It's so conservative. The risk taking, you got to take some risks if you want to, athlete in a sport. If you're a businessman or businesswoman as an entrepreneur, if you're a political leader, you got to make some moves. And here it breeds a malaise and a risk aversion and an investment aversion. And lastly, I didn't even talk about race. There's a whole, I've saved that for last, so now you don't have healthy dialogue. It's still a place where people are uncomfortable talking about race, which is goofy if you're trying to be successful. It's there, but here it's moving past taboo now. It's happening more, but it's not easy to have rigorous, accountable conversations, courageous conversations to move things forward.
Do you find that it's more racist still?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of at the forefront still going on. But you said, the mayor that got elected, I mean, the African Americans, they're 12.5% of the population in Milwaukee.
No, higher than that.
Higher than that in Milwaukee.
Oh, you're probably looking at the county. Maybe in the Milwaukee County.
Yeah.
But in the city, it's between 30 and 45. But keep going with your question.
Well, I'm just, if it's, overcoming those obstacles, but you've got a black mayor. Obviously, he's kind of bridging the gap because it takes more than just 35% of the black population to get someone elected, right? So they're having some successes there.
Right.
I just wondered if you think that racism is still playing, a key role in the things that you're dealing with and things you're seeing.
I do, and I think though, this is one of those times where discussion about systemic racism, if people can handle that, since we've been talking about that for 40 years, 50 years. So, but here it might be new is really the conversation. Do I think there are a disproportionate number of racist people in Milwaukee? No, I don't. But it's really a culture conversation. So Milwaukee has a segregated culture. I sometimes refer to it as segregated habits. So
that's a good word.
Things return to their homeostasis, or to their, if you get a car stuck in a groove in the wintertime and that groove is there, you can try to get up out of it, but you got to rock it just right to get it out. Otherwise, you're going to slide back into the groove. And so the culture here is a segregated, siloed culture. And I don't even mean white culture, although that was obviously the predominant culture, but it's just a So if you're in industry and you're having a conversation with the business community, you won't hear segregated, but you will hear siloed. If you're in the nonprofit sector and you're having conversations about how to make things go, you won't hear segregation necessarily, but you will hear siloed. If you're in the faith community, you might not hear segregation, but you hear siloed, and those are very similar things. The culture here is the kind of rigid, orderly, structured culture. And so if you are talking about, holistic moves, broad collaboration, that's kind of, I won't say it's frowned upon, but it's new. People don't instinctually move in that direction. And for those of us who play team sports, it's all we know. That's how you know how to work as a team. That's right. So you're here and you're befuddled, you're confused. Well, why are we not? Why is there a line here between us and that department? It'd be beneficial for us to be working together. And so it's really a culture here. I'm really very, very clear on that. I've been here for 30 years trying to figure it out. And when I finally figured out it's a culture thing, and changing cultures is hard. It's not expensive, but it's hard because it requires great intentionality. And so if somebody made me whatever, king for a day, or mayor, I'll go with king.
King, go with the king.
Or maybe I won't. No kings, no king. But if I had all the authority, if I was the consultant for the city, that's what I would say treat every project as a culture change project, because culture change requires a different type of intentionality. It requires a different type of communication. It requires a different type of persistent and consistent collaboration. And if you don't do, and I'm super clear, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to make change. That's really what's needed. So that actually is exciting, because that's doable. That's not a massive fusion of resources. Not that we wouldn't take it, but that's the right type of leadership, the right type of collaboration sustained over time. And I've seen it happen, and I've made it happen in smaller segments.
Interesting.
I think
I got a
like
question for you. When you look at it, my family came
Mm-hmm.
from Mississippi, came up to
Yeah.
Milwaukee, in the early 40s, 50s. And guess what? We had factories. So, as you said earlier, we had a lot of jobs. So, they were teaching us, go to school, get that 9 to 5, work for 30 years. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the country started to change. The inner city started to change.
Right.
Milwaukee didn't change. And then I left in the 90s. So, it's been like 30 years, but it doesn't seem that Milwaukee has caught up to give opportunities to the different minorities, whether it's black, brown, Asian, whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
where do you see the future, whether it's the next 5 years, the next 20 years, as in the direction of Milwaukee going with catching up with the rest of the country, maybe with technology or maybe tying in with different businesses? I don't know what your thought process, since you are on the
Mm-hmm.
ground. I'm not there anymore, so you probably have a better answer for that.
So yeah, a couple things. One of the things that has always troubled me, I've been curious about. Pretty gifted thinker. If you're a lawyer, you think ahead. You're a critical thinker. If you're a policymaker, hopefully you're thinking you're ahead. And I just have always been troubled by the fact that when deindustrialization came around, that doesn't appear like people anticipated that or planned for that. So I'll just start there, and I always think about Carter G. Woodson's book, Miseducation of the Negro, and it's got a whole bunch of propositions in it, but one of them is that we're being educated late. In other words, you're being educated for something that's going to be gone, and that's kind of what happened. We got here just in time to get factory jobs for a little while. There's a small window of time where Milwaukee had actually some of the highest indices for African American well-being before it tanked. One, and then so the city doesn't seem to have really recovered, in that it was on the cutting edge of whatever service industry, knowledge industry. It always felt like it lagged. So now, I think of the water industry, the green industry, and what opportunities would emanate from there. Of course, you've got to think about AI, both in terms of jobs, but also in terms of accelerants. I really, from a data standpoint, I still think about the educational ecosystem that's here that is underutilized. I say it's poorly designed. When I mention that ecosystem, I mean in particular MPS, UWM, MATC, maybe Marquette. The largest number of students of color that graduate from MPS go to MATC, the next go to UWM. And there's not a good flow of students through that system. And so that system could do a better job of educating, not having as many leaks in it, and producing more people coming out. And then we need to be innovative in equipping our students for where we're headed, not where we're been. I know I'm thinking about all of the students, and I know I'm not the first person to say this, over the past 5-7 years who've been channeled into coding. Like that was a thing, and I'm not sure, just by way of example, I don't think that's the thing anymore.
Right.
I don't think that's
right.
with AI. That felt like miseducation of the Negro again. It felt like Carter G. Woodson again. We focused you and channeled you into these things, and these jobs are going to be gone that we said were going to be the game changers. Now that ties to the innovation concept and being innovative, because if I'm innovative, and what does innovative mean? It just means, scanning the terrain, paying attention, listening to what people are talking about, what they're talking about, being inquisitive. Then you have some sense for what's coming down the pipe, and you can plan better. But Milwaukee, and let me tie it all up with a bow. It's actually one of the reasons I thought about starting Glue way back in 2005, 2006, because our policy environment is trash. It just is non-innovative. It's non-forward-looking. I think it's getting better now with some next generation. But I kept saying, okay, well, who's planning for us? Who's strategizing for us? Who's looking at policies for us? And it just wasn't happening. And so that's really where I started. Who's thinking about the future? And that's where I started thinking about Glue way back when. And so we have to have some thought leaders who have influence bringing ideas, fresh ideas and ideas from other places.
Yeah, and I think when I'm like, I thought we would go down this path, and
Yeah.
we've talked about all the symptoms of Milwaukee, like, well, the numbers are this, that, and the other. How do we change the narrative, one, about how we describe Milwaukee? But I think to start at the basic level, you have to be able to tell the up and coming generations, the younger kids that are in MPS or the schools, that okay, Milwaukee is not this, and it's okay to be a smart person. I was talking to my sister. I'm like, what's the problem with the education system? She says it's not cool to be smart. How do you change that narrative? And then also change the narrative where we're living in a city that's segregated. So you've got to change the narrative about being smart, change the perception of where Milwaukee can go and where it is. How do we tie that all together? And that seems like a lot of work. And so, like, through some of your things you're doing, are you reaching down to the youth more, or are you reaching laterally or to the business folks to kind of change the environment?
Great question. I think things rise and fall with leadership. I think that, this is maybe painful, but I think it's true. I think we have a senior leadership class, I'm generalizing, that's kind of mediocre. If you looked in Milwaukee and said, okay, show us the great institutions, show us ones that are excellent, that are thriving, that are killing the game, wow, that leader is really dynamic and really ahead of the curve. You're not going to find a lot of that. What you're going to find is that sometimes, and I'm not trying to knock it, but I'm a competitor. I'm an athlete.
Right.
We're athletes. And we were trained to aspire for excellence and not be satisfied with just okay, just not. So okay is just not okay with me. But here, okay becomes, we reward mediocrity here. And then I'm going to dip into a couple other places. Far too many awards for mediocrity. People get awards, and if you looked at the data behind those awards, you'd say, well, why did they get an award? They're leading an organization that's been failing for 15 years.
Yep.
How's that? And so that serves as like a proxy for performance. There is my friend, colleague, Dr. Biko Baker at UWM now always raises culture, the importance of culture, the need of investing in culture, youth culture, arts and culture. He's not the only one, but he's one who comes to mind, and how culture can lead and be transformative. And I think that's true. And in Milwaukee, there are a lot of, there is a bubbling culture class, and has been for a while, that can continue to break through and needs to be invested in. The educational systems, I think that all right, so there's a project here that's called M Cubed, and it's MPS, MATC, UWM. They've been working together for about a decade, and the guts of the project are good. They've got the three institutions working well together, but somehow, and I pushed them to do this, and they just wouldn't, I think, at risk aversion. Somehow they've got this project they've been working on, and they have, and if they have them now, it's very recent. They have no equity goals, no goals to close equity gaps in the education system in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which has the biggest gaps in the nation. So how do you set up a thing and be so timid with your goals? If I were were whatever for a day, if I was the potentate or the prime minister,
you're the king still. You're still the king.
Look, I'll be the prime minister. If I was the prime minister, I would invest some dollars in making that system look and feel more vibrant and more visible and more navigable. When I was at MATC, we were working on a project and had a vision where students, okay, you're at MPS, and this is just a solution, clearly not the solution. And now you're in 8th and 9th grade, and you can do dual enrollment classes, which means you could take classes at MATC or UWM or Marquette. Now you graduate a year early, and you got some college credits under your belt. And now you can go to MATC or UWM, and you've already saved money. You've got some college credits under your belt. Now maybe you get a chance to you put your hands on the HBCU because you have some relationships with the HBCU. And so now you spend 1 year at MATC, and then your next year at the HBCU, and you're close to getting a degree. So you've had a high school experience, a college experience, an HBCU experience. And now, and then from there, if you on it, you can also flip that over to go into grad school.
Right.
So now if I took what I just described, and now I'm talking very specifically about Black students and Hispanic students, if you were talking about Latino institutions. Now, if I took that and put that vision in front of some students and said, hey, y'all, check this out. This looks like this. Here's what it looks like. Here's how you can make your way here. Here's how you can get into college. It's not a dream. It's not a fantasy. Come on, let's go check it out now. Let's go. Let's go over there. Let's take some classes, because, you know, visualizing something, seeing something, that's not everything. But I guarantee that would increase the flow of students not dropping out of a high school, and those graduating, getting drawn into an ecosystem and seeing how they can move through it. Plus, you show their parents. And so that's not everything, but that's a very, very, very doable solution. You have to make it visible, believable, navigable. That won't get everybody, but you'll get more, because you have to have some idea that you can make it through the system. So that's a very doable. That's not a fantasy. It's not a dream. That's a doable plan. That's just incredibly doable. That could happen. That's an example on the education side. We have to make it, I don't want to say sexy, but it has to have some level of engagement. You have to show somebody where they can be. School's not an easy sell. You know, I don't want to go somewhere and spend money for 4 years where I could go get a job. Help me to see what it is. Help me see why that's exciting. Help me to see how that adds value. Yeah.
When you look at how we grew up in our time period, and a lot of all of our friends, there's a lot of people we know who strived to get out of Wisconsin and then come back. And then there's some who grew up in Wisconsin who strive to do bigger and better things. So, and this is dealing with Brothers Crossing. We deal with today and what was back in the day. So what we were doing back in the day that we saw the vision that we didn't get a chance to pass around to this generation? What was the missing link, or what disappeared between our generation and the generation today?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. I'm sure there's more than two. One is a fracturing of some communities, and the other is, when we got into the 80s, we really got into a bit more of a me, myself, and I culture.
Greed is good.
Culture. Yeah. There you go. You got it. Michael Douglas. Right. Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then in a wide range. So it really got into that individual consumption. I remember my first year on UWM's campus, because I didn't have cash in my pocket. I left home very poorly. I had a split when I left. All the money that I thought I had to spend, I had to pay for tuition, which is cool. I'm glad. And I didn't have no credit cards. But I don't know, we DeWalt, you and I are same class, 85, right?
Yeah, 85, yeah.
And so when I was on campus, and like all the kids they'd like go on the weekend and come back with like bags full of clothes from the mall. And I was like, where the heck is that? But it was credit cards. And so this whole me, myself, and I, greed is good. So that became good and intoxicating. And, now we have trillionaires. And so that's for sure is one. And then two, related, just some of our communities fractured, became transient, if you will. Institutions fractured. The church, I'm a pastor. The church does not play a central role like it used to. So we grow well, not just in individual homes, but in communities. Even being at the YMCA hooping when we were in high school, there was a community and a culture and a vibe. We, knew each other, and it's been, I don't know when I last saw you, 30 years probably?
30 years, yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he said Fernando, I said, oh yeah, Fernando. I remember Fernando as soon as he said it. And so the fracturing of community is not a small thing. The me, myself, and I thing, and the individualism, it does really take a village. Yeah. They're outliers, but it really, it's best to have a village, I'll say it that way. So those are some of my thoughts for how things got tough.
I think, like, for me, and I go on harping back, and we're going to go back a little bit. I think the thing I remember, and sorry, Cub, you didn't grow up in Milwaukee, and you probably are tired of all this Milwaukee talk, but we grew up, and where you went to high school and your exposures, Walter and Fernando. We were at our high school in Dominican. Do you think that played a role in how we were able to interpret the world coming at us? Because all three of us were probably in environments where we were the kind of the minority,
Sure.
and we were exposed to things we probably normally wouldn't have been exposed just because we kind of were going to school at those certain places. What do you think about, let's go back to your school. So you grew up in, I think you were in Homestead, right?
Homestead, right?
And then you
Right.
had exposure to a lot of different cultures, things, and then with your dad, and I'm sure you got exposure to other things. What do you think that played in your life? Because you got exposure to stuff, and there's a lot of kids that don't get exposure to a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good. I think exposure is important, and the grounding is important, equally important.
Mhm.
And because you can get exposed and not be grounded and go astray. So for me, like Homestead, it was a mixed bag. Very very white school. I had absolute culture shock when I got to Homestead, because Homestead, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary, and I actually led the anniversary team, which is humorous because I did not necessarily love the high school, and in particular because I came from Motown, from Detroit, and Detroit was more accustomed to how can I say it? Black people in power, and black people exercising power.
Yeah.
Black people, whatever, speaking up. And so I had a big culture shock because at Mequon, they were not used to that at all. I remember when I first got there, some people told me, and I'm going to get to the second part of your question about just exposure in general, said, Lanier, you are too competitive. And I was so confused because I
think all of y'all too competitive. Well, everyone on this thing.
I don't even know that there's such a thing as being too competitive. You know what I mean? And so I don't even know what that means. I'm not even the most competitive person in my house.
Yeah.
You can't be too competitive. But what they were really saying in retrospect is, you a little uppity. Now, I didn't know that's what they were saying, but that's what they were saying.
Oh, wow.
My point, though, is so there was some culture shock, but I was pretty well grounded. But the exposure then helps me now, and has helped me throughout, for navigating, yes, diverse spaces, for understanding people, for reading people, for leading people, for following. And it's a broader exposure. The broader exposure has been very helpful. And so, yeah, I think exposure is huge. They say reading and travel are really two great things, and maybe travel over reading in terms of being exposed. I would also add that somewhere we were talking about students, creating opportunities for them to travel beyond the borders of Milwaukee, beyond the borders of the state, makes a difference. Yep.
So how do you, since you brought it up, coming from the big D, coming on over here, how did you do knowing that your father was famous? And how did people treat you and relax? Because you had used the word grounded a couple times, which is, I think, a positive thing for everybody to understand and know. But how was it with your famous dad, and everybody loved him when he was doing good, and on the days where they had a bad game, you got the brunt of it? So if you can go through that and give, people who are listening in that mindset.
It's a dual-edged sword. So it's weird. They ought to have a class. They probably do now, for they probably do for families and kids on how to deal with that, because you're a kid and nobody else knows the details of what your dad does day in and day out. I saw your dad at work yesterday. I saw your dad, your dad sucked yesterday at work. Your dad, he was great. Your dad was awesome. It's just different. And so that's not easy to navigate. And I found out later, like real recently, in the past 3 to 5 years, my sisters hated it. They're younger than I am. I didn't hate it. It was both, sometimes good, sometimes challenging. But then as I got older, it helped me as a leader, because I learned that I can't be really worried about what other people think. Right. And so I've got a little bit of, I guess, thick skin. I'm not as, I don't need people to like me. I'm not worried. I listen, I'll take critique, but I'm not overly concerned. If somebody says something, it doesn't bother me. So it's helped me as a leader. It helps me with exposure. I think it probably, over time, it's more helpful. but I had to get grounded in that. Even like I said, my sisters don't like it at all. If somebody would come up to the table, they'd be mad. They'd want to curse them out. I didn't know this till recently. Even now, I probably shouldn't say this. I might get in trouble. But when my father passed, a couple years back, 3 years ago, and there was they were talking about him on the news, and they're like, "Oh, why are they talking about Dad?" Well, I mean, he's Dad. He's famous. He's a global ambassador. They're gonna do it. No, they don't. And so, but I appreciate that for them. So it was helpful for me. It's helpful for me. And then, of course, having somebody that has that drive for excellence permeates other aspects of life. And it even connects to our conversation about this city, because it makes me loopy when people won't aspire to excellence. Like, man, you're mediocre and you don't care in this institution. Try harder, go higher, set a bigger goal. Don't just be satisfied with average. Great.
Yeah.
We complied.
Yeah.
Compliance is not a ceiling. Compliance is a floor.
No, I agree with that. I think we're all kind of, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, why do you think people lack motivation?
I
mean, everybody wants to do better, right?
But there's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a difference. All right, now I'm gonna go straight into the Bob Lanier mode now.
Go ahead.
It's just where do you want to be? Do you want to aspire for excellence? Then this is what it takes. DeWalt, I love basketball. I didn't love it enough to put the time in to be a Division I basketball player. I probably, if I had put the time in, I probably could have. I had the physicality, had the name, didn't even think about the fact that I had the name. But truth of the matter is, I love basketball just enough to dominate UWM intramurals and University of Michigan Law School intramurals. That was my level of, and we did. But I didn't have the love for it at that level, and that's okay, because I didn't have that aspiration for excellence. So the question, to answer your question, is where do you want to be? Do you want to be excellent or not? And if not, then you can't knock anybody for that. I mean, yeah, you can, but that's what their goal is. But for institutions, now you got me preaching. Here comes the pastor. For institutions that serve the community, they have, in my view, an obligation to aspire for excellence, because they're serving. And in some places they don't do that, and people get mediocre service. And if the community does not have mechanisms to demand excellence, then it stays there at that mediocre level. And that's one of the reasons I'm still here. I can't, because it just bothers me just that much, because I've been blessed to have access, blessed to have a father who cared and invested in, but blessed to go to different places and there. But for the grace of God, I could have grown up in a different situation without the access and the opportunity that you talked about, and be in a different situation. And it just shouldn't be that way. There's a whole bunch of kids, smarter than me, faster than me, who should be probably where I am or further, but did not have the access, and the system should be better. So that's. Can I get an amen?
Amen. So before we move away from your father, because I promise with my wife, she's like, I read this article that Bob Lanier used to sharpen used to have long fingernails. So when he's playing defense, he'd scrape them. I'm like, I'll ask him. He probably don't know, but
I don't think that was a story about him.
Okay.
So, but that just applies to fingernails. But a foot on the foot, a hand on the hip, an elbow in the back, a butt check. So that particular one I haven't heard about, but there's another list of stuff that he did. He was crafty in the post, and moving people around and holding them down.
So there, like when we cross paths, and we cross paths probably like at some summer leagues and open gyms and stuff. So did you feel like a pressure? Like, I wonder, like, I was inquisitive about, because you had a father that was a great hooper. Did you feel pressure to be a great hooper, or did people put that pressure on you? Like, how did you deal with that?
Similar to QB in fantasy football. He thinks he can do it, but it don't happen. But
Not a little bit, not too much. Strangely, the greater pressure probably was coming from the suburban school into the city.
Mm.
I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
remember my freshman year in undergrad, so I was on UWM's team, and my roommate was good brother Maurice Turner. He was at Marshall High School, and we used to antagonize one another. He would get at me, and I would get at him. We'd be wrestling in the dorm room, sometimes just really physical. And he
Right.
thought I was soft because I was from the suburbs, and I was not. And so I think for me that was actually the more challenging piece here in Milwaukee. But no, not some, but not too much. I didn't experience it as great. I think we were right at the edge of, like, when my dad retired is right around the time where the NBA exploded.
Yeah.
So he retired
Yeah.
in '84.
Yeah.
I think '84 Jordan was still they '84 Olympics, right? They was still
Yeah, that's so he was
British,
coming out
yeah.
the next year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then he was the president of the NBA Players Association. The league was struggling, and so he was doing stuff with a collective bargaining and did some stuff around the drug policy. So we were just on the edge of, like, national and international fame. I mean, clearly he was well known, and so the pressure was not that great. And plus, he didn't put that type of pressure on me either. I think he probably wishes he had, in retrospect, from some of the things that my sisters again tell me. But he really always talked about basketball being a metaphor, which I'm doing now repeatedly for the game of life. And he was right. And then when I think about his career, he retired in '84, and then for the next, what is that, 40 years? 38 years was with basketball, but he was not playing basketball. He was read to achieve, stay in school, global ambassador. So he was really serious about, and it's deeply embedded in my being and the work that I do in community. So the love that he talked about that I didn't have to achieve at this level in basketball, but I do have it for community and community leadership. That's where I put the time in and have the impact and make a difference. And that's all Bob language. I feel like I'm channeling him right now. These are exact words he'd be saying. Yeah. And so yeah, no, it was plus I was at Homestead, man. It was just that's a whole other story.
Yeah, no.
I did not love playing basketball there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really happy you joined us. I think the words that I wrote down when I was talking about this, I'm like, I wrote three bullet points. I was like, how do we change the narrative? Change the narrative on Milwaukee, change the narrative with the kids and where they're growing up, giving them access and so on. I thought the other one was, and you talked about a little bit with team sports, structure and discipline. You have to create an environment where you can create a structure for somebody, and they have to be disciplined in it, just in the way you were like disciplining of it. You had a famous father who wanted to play basketball, but you went your own path, disciplining enough, get into law school, do all the things you have to do. And then the phrase, it's my word du jour, is meliorism. I think that humans can change the culture. And so those are the 3 points I think we hit upon today. And I thank you for joining us. I know we had a long-winded conversation. We've gone across a lot of places, and we are welcome back for anything you would want to share with us. Any final thoughts, Nando? And
I think what you brought to the table is you brought a process of you said it, dialogue. You thought to bring things up for people to actually have a conversation. Sitting by the water cooler, sitting there having a drink, watching sports is just bringing up the dialogue to continue the process of elevating Milwaukee, so people don't have that stigma or that name to it. Now we can take one step at a time, 1 foot at a time. And I think what you brought to this conversation was, what I took from it was dialogue. So I appreciate it, bro.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of folks say that it always starts at home, but if young folks don't have the structure at home that you had, Rodney had, and so on, and Fernando, I mean, how do you reach those kids?
I'm glad you asked that question, because you were talking about structure and discipline, and certainly you can and should get it in the home. My most significant hashtag that I use is build community. And, you can have the basketball team as a community, the YMCA as a community, the church as a community. That's where I've really learned best as a leader, in the church, because a church is a community that shapes culture. The most critical two words are over time. And I've watched it. So I've been a pastor for 14 years. And so I've watched how people have shifted and become part of and conformed to and contributed to the culture of the church over time, because it is a community. It's an organic community. And I think especially for Milwaukee, if you think about what it means to cultivate community around the water cooler, Fernando, is a momentary community. We're engaging, we're vibing, we're talking, and doing that with intentionality. So, Cov, and those are some of the things that have broken down. There were more opportunities for youth to engage in different places where they could go be in community. And, if anybody that's a parent, if you don't give your kids some structure, some place to do some stuff, they're going to go act a fool a little bit. Yeah. And so some of those things have broken down too. So yeah, certainly personal responsibility, all that. But for policymakers who have the ability to have influence, creating spaces for youth to engage in community and grow in community and fail in community and succeed in community is huge.
Yes.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So thank you again. Welcome back anytime you want to come back to chit chat about anything in the world and show us your progress in Milwaukee. We really appreciate it. Glad I still go back. We'll hook up next time I'm in town. And hey, remember everybody, look left, look right. Brothers Crossing. Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Pat.